Hello, everyone. My name is Matthew Dorrian. I'm a technical architect currently working in Liberty IT. And today we're going to talk about the well-architected serverless journey myself and the organization has went on using one of our recent examples and products called the equine and livestock portal. So just want to start, but there was a time before serverless. Serverless seems to be everywhere, but before that, just want to talk a bit about my background. So I would say, like a lot of developers, I started on typical 3-tier architecture, just traditional layers of presentation, business, data. The technology was Angular, Java, Spring Boot, Postgres, all very Java based, coming out of uni, that's kind of what I expected. And the pattern it used was mostly synchronous request response type operations. So the whole concept of event driven and async that the AWS world kind of is based on was very new to me. So I did get an opportunity to have a first taste of serverless, and the first taste came in an app that was containerized in Docker. So this containerized app was hosted on Open Cloud Foundry, and we had an opportunity to move it into the AWS realm. So the first thing we did was to put it in AWS Fargate. And for anyone who doesn't know what that is, it's AWS's containerization service that handles auto scaling for you. And really what that allowed us to do was to apply the strangler pattern going forward. So instead of defaulting to putting in more Java and Spring Boot, since we were in the AWS ecosystem, we could start looking and leveraging serverless technologies, Lambdas, SNS, Dynamo, and we started applying that serverless first mindset. So after I kind of got a taste of that, did I want more? And of course, the answer is yes. So an opportunity came up with a brand new project, and with LIT and Liberty Mutual being very product focused and customer focused, we flew out to Virginia to do a product discovery on site with the business, interviewing customers. And this was back when life was simpler, doing sushi making lessons and making sure it was a bit more than just work. So during 2 weeks, we really delved into discovering the problem. So we ran 35 different exercises, and at the end, we wanted an MVP solution and a roadmap that was outlined. And what we were building for, or the business problem, was that we wanted to build an equine and livestock portal to capitalize on the growing market. We had a very, established roadmap. We were going to focus on horses, and believe it or not, insurance things like zebras as well, and then move on to livestock and other sort of animals. And you'll see there that one of our staple points of our product vision is a best in show user experience. So the ability to pair with product designers, quick feedback cycles, iteration, prototyping, all was very important for this product. So we came back to Belfast and we had a difficult decision to make. Myself and the team members that was assembled were cloud ready. Let's say we had extensive team experience in Spring and Spring Boot in PCF, OCF, Docker. And obviously with that, usually runs 24/7 without intervention, has limited scaling capabilities, and usually a pretty high TCO, total cost of ownership, or run cost. But we wanted to go serverless first. We wanted to delve in to having a full serverless platform. So we knew this meant slowing down to speed up because the team had very limited AWS experience. We wanted to take advantage of the growing in popularity cloud development kit, AWS CDK, that I'm sure you've heard Matt Coulter represented and talking about with CDK days and cdkpatterns.com. And we wanted to take advantage of serverless first, not just for the pay-as-you-go pricing model, not just for the scalable architecture, but we really wanted to focus on time to value. We wanted to focus on the business problem. I myself, as the tech lead architect, didn't want to focus on the login problem, the queuing problem, infrastructure. I wanted AWS to do all of the heavy lifting using all of the managed services that they provide, so I could focus on solving the business needs. So how did this journey start? The foundations, what we try to do is encourage the mindset of slowing down to speed up. So whenever a new developer or myself or the project started, we allowed a grace period of say 1 to 2 weeks, really focused on education and upskilling. And of course, LIT's organization about learning and bettering yourself, allowed for this to happen very naturally. So as part of this education, we practice in the AWS sandbox. Again, we're very well equipped, to take advantage of the AWS ecosystem. The organizational learnings are very well shared around LIT. So you could identify contacts to speak to make connections, to learn from. Of course, reading documentation, blogs, newsletters. We wanted to target certain services that we knew would be appropriate in an event-driven architecture. So looking at, EventBridge, SNS, SQS, Dynamo, Lambda, all the typical serverless, scalable, cheap services we wanted to use. We ensured that every person went through the CDK workshop. And if anyone who hasn't been on that, I would encourage checking that out and looking at using CDK patterns. Whenever you combine all that with the enterprise enablers and accelerators that Liberty Mutual and LIT has, it allowed us to really build up the serverless foundations before jumping straight into building the architecture. So if people have seen this before, it was during CDK day, it was released within Liberty Mutual and LIT. We have a tool or an accelerator called the software accelerator, and it enables teams to deploy well-architected CDK patterns in a number of clicks. So reducing infrastructure build plans, deploy plans in a matter of seconds rather than weeks. And that, of course, freed up the time to invest in education. So I really started to love this journey. And of course, anyone watches Schitt's Creek, it's a fantastic show. Once we focused on the well-architected foundations, we wanted to move into the well-architected framework. It put a bit more of an official lens on it to see could we apply the learnings from AWS. So if anyone doesn't know the well-architected framework, it's a framework established by not just AWS, but the top cloud providers. GCP and Azure have their own particular version. It's all about learning, measuring, and building architectural best practices into your solutions and providing ways to improve and highlight some vulnerabilities in your system. So you're here 5 pillars always being mentioned. Some people use acronyms called SCORP, but cost optimization, operational excellence, reliability, security, and performance efficiency. And if you look across them 5, they're not just appropriate for serverless technologies. It's usually any solution you try to build should be optimized for cost. You should be able to get insights into how it's operating, the observability, the monitoring, the tooling should obviously be reliable, secure and very performant. And I suppose them last 3 falls very much into the customer experience and your typical product SLAs. So one of the example pillars is cost optimization, a real focus on avoiding unnecessary costs. So whenever you move into the AWS ecosystem, developers have a lot more control. By them tweaking certain attributes whenever they're requesting resources, it can have a dramatic effect on the cost of the solution and the run cost. And also knowing which solutions actually have a very high cost impact and the ability to tweak the right number of resources, picking the right type of resources, and ensuring that it can scale without overspending and over provisioning. I'm sure everyone's heard of the term, like vertical scaling versus horizontal scaling, and this AWS's serverless solutions allows us to horizontally scale across the board. So don't want to waste money, and that's hopefully gives you a flavor of one of the pillars. Next, we'll move on to the well-architected reviews. So within the AWS console itself, they have a well-architected tool, and this will allow you to evaluate yourself against different questions within each of them pillars, and then suggest guidance and produce recommendations. So this is a typical report that comes out at the end. You can see that the report produces an improvement plan that highlights across different pillars the risks associated with your chosen architecture and answers. So of course, teams can use this, add these items to their backlog, prioritize accordingly, maybe tackle obviously the high risk first, and move on that well-architected journey. So to make this feel a bit more real, we're going to start with a simple web service pattern. This is one of the most common patterns you see on the internet, and kind of the serverless examples. And it's typical, client request response, an API gateway that invokes a Lambda that operates with a database or data store called Dynamo. And looking at that pattern out of the gate, we want to look at the well-architected lens and see how well-architected this is. So looking at the reliability pillar as an example, one of the questions it asks is about regulating inbound requests. So as you know, of course, is about analyzing throughput, responding to DDoS or protecting yourselves. And it asks you certain questions such as, do you have throttle limits? Do you have burst limits? Do you have usage plans? Or how do you protect against non-scalable resources? For example, if you weren't using a scalable database like Dynamo. And if I was to look at the architecture of that simple web service pattern, I would be confident to only tick one of them boxes. Thankfully, all of the components within that pattern are scalable by nature, which means that I don't need to think about non-scalable resources. Perfect example is an RDS proxy is a pattern you can put in to throttle requests down to a non-finite resource. So I go through the tool. It provides an improvement plan. It provides guidance. And you can see that it's suggesting, let's use throttling and then let's apply and enforce API quotas. You're not on your own. AWS provides so much documentation, so much resource with really clear instruction. And by going through this as a team, as developers, you can really work out how to easily improve your software. And this is one of the examples. To enable throttling on your API gateway, it's a simple, if you're using the console, it's a simple tick and selecting, what's your expected traffic, how many requests per second do you expect, what's your bursting strategy. And if you're using CDK, which I know and love, all you have to do is put in two simple properties, but that protects your application so much against DDoS and wasting unneeded invocations. So as a developer and as a team, I feel now very happy to tick that first box and explain why I'm happy with that, with the throttle and burst rates. Now, if I review the question, it's actually reduced the high risk. So if I could leave it there technically, but we should also aim for engineering excellence. We should look at applying all of the best practices, regardless of the risk outcome. So if I was to look at the next suggestion is to add an API key. So of course, API keys enable quotas and throttling at a consumer level. If your API needs to be productized and monetized, you need a way to track usage. And of course, you can very easily add that to your APIs. If I review the question again, now as a developer, I'm very confident in the solution I've presented when I evaluate myself against AWS's best practices. So very happy with that question. Moving on very quickly because time is flying on, is the operational excellence pillar, and probably my favorite pillar, all about observability and making sure that you have insights into your application. So certain concepts here exist about the serverless application's health, all about metrics, alarms, tracing, logging, and of course, looking at the starting pattern. I'm not very confident to select any of these, so I'm going to try and improve this architecture as well. Using the guidance and improvement plan, very much similar to other ones, I want to improve and apply the concept of a dashboard, that has a concept of alarms and alerts. And thankfully, cdkpatterns.com exists, created, in-house with Matt Coulter and LAT. And you can see here that there is a pattern that already exists called the CloudWatch dashboard that I can easily clone down, deploy to my AWS, and give me that open source working examples. So what I get out of the box by that simple utilization of an open source pattern is that I now get, my very visible dashboard that I can track, I can delve into, I can track errors, latency, request count, just true observability within my system. I can, of course, set up CloudWatch alarms. So I want to be alerted. I want proactive monitoring in place that if a 400 or 500 error exists, I will want to set up an event to react. So, within my team, we get email support, we get Slack webhooks, so we can proactively monitor our architecture. Next is one of my favorite services, distributed tracing. No longer is a simple 3-tier architecture that the request goes into this black box of Java Spring Boot, and you can follow a Splunk log, jumping down the methods and jumping back. Once you go into the AWS's distributed event-based ecosystem, it's quite hard to track the concept of a trace or a full interaction. It's very easy to delve into each part to get login and using CloudWatch the individual logs, but X-Ray enables this observability across a distributed architecture. And you can see here, it's very simple, but it tracks the request coming in, goes through an API gateway, invokes a Lambda, and of course, in a more complicated ecosystem, which some of our use cases are, you can see a full service map jumping between AWS step functions, jump between SNS, SQS, and hopefully you can notice the deliberate colors. This indicates a healthy request. If an error happens, the particular part that's broken will be highlighted in red or yellow. And that is very, very important. If any developer is on the call doing production support, whenever you get a call at 3 a.m, you want the mean time to incident discovery to be as quick as possible. And if I have a service like X-Ray, I can hone in on the exact problem child to try to resolve the service much quicker, keeping our customers and our SLAs intact. And it's, of course, CDK and AWS makes everything so easy to use. And by enabling a few properties, you can take advantage of such a powerful service. Looking at the question now, I can tick, we're looking at metrics, we're alerting on it, we're using tracing. And by that simple example, if I look at our starting architecture with just 3 simple artifacts, by going through the well-architected tools guidance and help, we now have this well-architected guided architecture. So you can see, concept of API keys, X-ray, alarms, CloudWatch dashboards, metrics. So it gives you a much richer architecture experience for developers and also for your product support. So making it real, I was a bit skeptical, if I was to be honest, about the well-architected framework. Whenever I heard about it, I just thought, how much value can a questionnaire bring? Because really, when you look at it, it's a bunch of questions, it's guidance, it's resources. But for me, the realization and kind of the aha moment was that it's actually a journey. So myself, developers, the team, the company, the organization are going on this well-architected journey. And it starts by applying, a typical AWS lens to it. And what we've looked at today was the serverless lens. And by doing it as a team, getting together, looking at our architecture, maybe splitting up the pillars between different people in the team, we can learn and improve, and then get together with our architects, our tech leads, do an official type of review that the facilitator can add on their expertise that maybe I haven't considered, A/B testing, for example. Maybe I don't know the canary deployments exist. So that's where the getting together, the shared exercises can help everyone involved. One thing that came out of our well-architected journey is an innovation that started as inner source that turned open source. One of the well-architected suggested practices is a concept called power tuning. And if you look at the graph at the top, what it essentially does is that whenever you configure and set up a Lambda, the default memory is 128 megabytes. And that is okay for standard trivial operations. But as soon as you start, operating with different services using SDKs, doing network calls, the Lambda can actually be optimized by simply tweaking a value and selecting a particular memory. And that's quite a hard thing to try to guess. So what the power tuner does is it visualizes and runs your Lambda against a set number of memories for you to visualize. And so you can see here, this Lambda is ran against 2 memory operations. And you can see that the execution time goes down, but of course the cost goes up. And whenever you look at this particular example, 14 milliseconds down to 7 milliseconds, unless I'm in a very critical performant throughput based app, I think 14 milliseconds is probably going to be okay for an operation. So that Lambda might not be worth tuning, or it might not be worth the return on investment that I would put in. So this tool exists out in GitHub. You can spin it up in your own organization. You can use the power tuner to optimize your Lambdas, and it's all with a focus on improving your performance and also saving money, and that balance and strategy between it. So was it worth it? Of course, I could pick out a number of things. It gives the developers time to reflect. While looking at the guidance, we realized that AWS moves so fast that new services could be realized. A perfect example here was that we are using AWS step functions for orchestration. And step functions are AWS's recommended approach for orchestrating a complex process that has excellent error handling, retry, backing off strategies, everything like that. And of course, tries to prevent the anti-pattern of a Lambda calling another Lambda while that Lambda sits idle, waiting, burning money. So we actually discovered that our step functions were standard, and in AWS there's 2 types, the standard and express. And by us evaluating the new service, the new type, we actually switched our orchestration over to express step functions. And that, what does that mean? Basically what it meant was that we actually got a times 20 saving on all of our orchestration, and we actually improved our throughput because the express step functions are actually more scalable out of the box. So fantastic learning, which of course we then shared across our organization. But for me and the team, it's all about improvements and learning, bettering ourselves as developers, as an org, as our product, and our team's confidence has grown, because I can say that I can stand over my architecture, and it's not Matthew's opinion or Ryan's opinion. It's evaluated against AWS's standards and best practices, and that just gives our team a sense of confidence, which I quite liked. So of course, it's not just for tech's sake. There has to be business outcomes at the end. And this product that we released, the Equine Livestock Portal, by utilizing AWS's serverless technologies, it enabled us to release our MVP in a matter of weeks. It enabled a very small team of 6 people, which consisted of 4 engineers, a product manager, and product owner, and a product designer, to use that balanced skill to really focus on applying engineering excellence with the product mindset, the user focus, all to solve a business need. And you can see there are some critical pieces of feedback that we've collected from our business and customers, is that they actually think it's a total game changer. And of course, the architectural nerd in me is very happy that I can run a whole system that's scalable, that's meeting the business's need for $280 or dollars a year, which is truly scalable. So very, very happy with the results, very happy with our learning journey, and the true balance of engineering, product, and our customer needs. So wrapping up now, I think it's totally worth jumping in to AWS embracing serverless technologies, embracing releasing to production, releasing business value much quicker, and applying the well-architected lens to help you along your way. So would I go back to Spring Boot Java? Probably not. I think this is kind of where I want to be in the future, unless something else changes. So I will leave you on kind of a call to action or a mic drop moment, hopefully. How well architected is your product? If you're going to apply the pillars and look at what you've built. And that wraps me up.